The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had for the past 23 years. Do-hyun Lee stood in his fields watching the golden wheat sway in the breeze. His daughter had left for school an hour ago. His wife was preparing lunch in their small house on the hillside. Life was peaceful here, far from Earth, far from the noise of the galaxy. 47,000 people called this place home. They grew crops, raised families, and built a future among the stars. Do-hyun wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. The harvest would be good this year. The medicinal plants they grew helped cure diseases across dozens of worlds. Even the proud Tekkan species bought their medicines. Even the distant Quillians sent trade ships. New Haven mattered. They were making a difference. The first ship appeared in the sky at noon. It was massive, dark, and shaped like a blade. Then another appeared. Then 10 more. They hung in the atmosphere like birds of prey, casting shadows across the farmlands. Do-hyun's communicator buzzed. Emergency broadcast. All colonists to shelters immediately. He ran toward his house, his heart pounding. His wife was already gathering their emergency supplies. Their daughter's school was activating lockdown procedures. In orbit, Captain Ji-won Park watched her scanner screen with growing dread. Her ship, the Horizon's Edge, had just entered the New Haven system for a routine patrol. Instead, she found a fleet. Vecran Empire warships, 23 of them. Their weapons were already charging. Send a distress signal to Earth, Ji-won ordered her communications officer. Priority Alpha. Tell them New Haven is under threat. Earth was 6 weeks away at maximum speed. Any help would arrive far too late. The Vecran broadcast came through on all channels. The voice was cold, mechanical, translated by computer. This system belongs to the Vecran Empire by ancient territorial rights. All human colonists have 6 hours to evacuate. Noncompliance will result in forced removal. 6 hours to evacuate 47,000 people, with no transport ships in orbit except Ji-won's small reconnaissance vessel that could barely hold 300. It was impossible. It was designed to be impossible. Ji-won opened a channel to the Vecran flagship. This is Captain Ji-won Park of the Terran Defense Fleet. New Haven is a registered human colony, recognized by the Galactic Council for 23 years. Your claim has no legal standing. The reply came 3 minutes later. Your protest is noted. You have 5 hours and 57 minutes. Down on the surface, Sun-mi Han was ushering her students into the underground shelter beneath the school. She was a teacher, trained for emergencies, but nothing had prepared her for this. The children were crying. Some didn't understand. The older ones knew exactly what was happening. Yuna Kim, the colony's chief medical officer, arrived with supplies and emergency equipment. Her face was pale but determined. How many can the shelter hold? Yuna asked. 200, Sun-mi replied. We have 300 students. They looked at each other. Neither spoke the terrible mathematics aloud. Across the colony, similar scenes played out. Underground bunkers built for emergencies, never meant for full evacuation. Parents making impossible choices. The colonial administrator broadcast a final message. Stay calm, help is coming. But everyone knew the truth. Help was weeks away. The Vecran were already here. Do-hyun made it to the shelter with his wife and daughter. The heavy doors closed behind them with a hollow boom. Inside, families huddled together in the dim light. Some prayed. Some held each other. Some simply stared at nothing, their minds refusing to accept what was about to happen. Above them, Captain Ji-won made her decision. She couldn't evacuate everyone. She couldn't fight 23 warships, but she could bear witness. She could record everything. She positioned her ship at the edge of the system, sensors running at maximum, and began documenting every moment. The 6 hours passed like 6 minutes and 6 years at the same time. When the deadline expired, the Vecran didn't hesitate. The first orbital strike hit the Capitol building, then the spaceport, then the power stations. The bombardment was systematic, calculated, and merciless. They weren't just destroying military targets. They were erasing the colony itself. Ji-won watched her screen through tears. Each red flash represented hundreds of lives, thousands. The sensors picked up the thermal signatures. The communication channels filled with screams, then prayers, then silence. She recorded it all. Every moment. Every death. The attack lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, New Haven was gone. The fields where Do-hyun had worked that morning were craters. The school where Sun-mi taught was rubble. The hospital where Yuna had saved lives was ash. 46,800 people were dead, but Jiwan's sensors detected life signs. Underground. The bunkers had held 200 survivors, maybe more. She immediately began calculating rescue operations. Her ship could take them all if she pushed life support to the limits. Then her communication officer gasped. "Captain, you need to hear this." The Vecran command channel was still open. They hadn't bothered to encrypt it. Why would they? Who would challenge them? The audio was clear. Vecran officers laughing, joking about how the humans had scattered like insects. One commander asked if they should finish the shelters too. Another said no, leave some alive to spread the warning. Make sure neighboring systems knew what happened when you refused Vecran demands. It wasn't war. It wasn't even about territory. It was a message. A demonstration. A massacre designed to intimidate an entire sector of space. Jiwan's hands shook as she downloaded the recordings. Everything. The bombardment. The laughter. The casual cruelty. She looked at her crew. They were crying, angry, shocked. They were young officers who had joined the fleet for exploration, not for this. "Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures," Jiwan said quietly. "We're getting those survivors out." It took 18 hours to extract everyone from the collapsed bunkers. Do-Yun emerged carrying his daughter, his wife beside him, all of them covered in dust and blood. Sunmi helped carry injured students. Yuna worked without stopping, treating wounds, administering pain medication, keeping people alive through sheer determination. When the last survivor was aboard, Jiwan set course for the nearest human outpost. 3 weeks travel. 3 weeks with traumatized people crowded into every available space. 3 weeks to decide what to say. In the end, she kept it simple. She transmitted the recordings ahead at maximum priority. She added only one message: New Haven is gone. They murdered everyone. They're still laughing. The transmission reached Earth on a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, every human world had received it. By Thursday, something happened that the galaxy had never seen before. Every major human colony, station, and settlement went silent. No broadcasts, no communications, no trade. For 24 hours, humanity mourned as one. When they spoke again, everything had changed. Premier Sujin Ro stood at the window of her office in Geneva, watching the sun set over Earth. Behind her, the emergency session of the Terran Assembly had been running for 6 hours. Representatives from every human world were present, either in person or by hologram. The chamber was silent now. Everyone had seen the recordings. Everyone had heard the laughter. Sujin turned from the window. She was 53 years old, a career diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between species. She believed in peace and negotiation and the rule of law. She had won her position by promising to keep humanity safe through wisdom, not weapons. Now she walked to the podium and every eye in the galaxy was watching. "Our children called for help," she began, her voice steady. "They called for 6 hours. We were too far away. We couldn't reach them in time. 46,800 people are dead because we weren't there." She paused, looking at each representative. Never again, the chamber erupted. Not in argument, but in agreement. Voices from Mars, from Titan, from colonies so distant they existed only as points of light in the night sky, all of them saying the same thing. Never again. Ambassador Minho Kang sat in the visitors' gallery, still wearing his formal robes from the Galactic Council. He had resigned his position that morning, walking out of the council chambers after they refused to condemn the Vecran attack. They called it an internal territorial dispute. They suggested mediation. They did everything except demand justice. Minho had served the council for 12 years. He believed in galactic unity, in cooperation between species. He had brokered trade agreements, prevented wars, and built friendships with aliens from 100 worlds. None of it mattered now. The council had shown its true face. They would sacrifice human lives to maintain political stability. "Ambassador Kang," Sujin called out, "please approach the podium." Minho walked down to the floor, his footsteps echoing in the massive chamber. He placed his hand on the speaker's stone, an ancient tradition from Earth's early days. When you touched the stone, you spoke truth or you spoke nothing at all. "I have spent 12 years representing humanity to the galaxy," Minho said. "I believed that diplomacy could solve any problem. I was wrong. The Galactic Council does not serve justice. It serves power. The strong do what they want. The weak suffer, and the council writes reports. He pulled a data chip from his pocket and held it up. This contains every instance of Vecran aggression over the past 30 years. 17 colonies destroyed, 3 entire species displaced, hundreds of thousands dead. The council knows. They have always known. They do nothing because the Vecran have a powerful fleet and a seat on the security committee. The chamber was dead silent. I formally withdraw humanity from the Galactic Council's jurisdiction for all matters. Concerning human survival and security, we will honor our trade agreements. We will respect the sovereignty of other species. But we will no longer ask permission to defend our people. The vote came 2 hours later. Every representative in favor. 0 against. 0 abstentions. The Terran Assembly authorized what they called Total Mobilization Protocol. The last time humanity had used it was 150 years ago during the Colony Wars, when Earth's nations fought for control of the solar system. That conflict had killed millions and almost destroyed their homeworld. They swore never to militarize like that again. They were breaking that promise now. Admiral Taehyung Nam received the authorization at 0300 hours. He was 61 years old, a veteran of border skirmishes and pirate suppression. He had never commanded a war fleet. No living human had. Humanity fought with merchants and diplomats, not soldiers. Their military existed for defense, for rescue operations, for showing the flag at distant stations. That ended tonight. Taehyung activated protocols that had been written decades ago and never used. Across 200 human worlds, the orders went out simultaneously. Every shipyard stopped building colony vessels and started building warships. Every defense station called up reserves. Every able-bodied volunteer who wanted to serve was accepted. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, 3 million people had enlisted. Within a month, the number hit 10 million. These weren't professional soldiers. They were farmers like Do-hyun, teachers like Sunmi, medical officers like Yuna, people who had lost friends, family, or simply their faith that the galaxy would protect them. The shipyards worked around the clock. Humanity had always been good at building things. They built the fastest colony ships, the most efficient mining stations, the most comfortable habitats. Now they applied that same skill to weapons. They weren't elegant. They weren't beautiful, but they worked. Railguns that could punch through any shield, EMP bombs that could cripple entire fleets, AI targeting systems that never missed, drones that could swarm enemy vessels. Humans had spent centuries developing technology for exploration and trade. Weaponizing it took 6 weeks. The galaxy didn't notice at first. They saw the mobilization and dismissed it as grief, as anger that would fade. Humanity had always been reactive, peaceful, focused on profit rather than power. The idea that they could pose a threat was ridiculous. The Vecran Empire certainly wasn't worried. They issued a formal statement through the Galactic Council. We regret the necessary loss of life during the New Haven territorial reclamation. The system was legally ours under ancient charter, recognized by the Council archives. We hope this incident will not damage our trade relationships with humanity. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just bureaucratic language and veiled threats. They expected humanity to negotiate, to accept reparations, to move on. Journalist Junho Shin broadcast the Vecran statement across every human network. He was young, barely 30, but his coverage of the New Haven massacre had made him famous. He sat in his studio, the Vecran statement displayed behind him, and he didn't editorialize. He just read it word for word. Then he showed the footage again. The bombardment, the laughter, the children's shelters deliberately targeted. Public opinion across human space was unified in a way it had never been before. It didn't matter if you were from Earth or the outer colonies. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor, military or civilian. Everyone agreed. This could not stand. Premier Sujin gave one final address before the fleet launched. She stood in the assembly chamber, surrounded by representatives who had authorized the largest military action in human history. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with something ancient. New Haven was one colony, she said. 47,000 people. A tiny fraction of humanity. The galaxy thinks we will forget. They think we will move on. They think this is about one world. She leaned forward, gripping the podium. They're wrong. This is about all of us. Every human who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of a better future. Every family that left Earth to build something new. Every child who deserves to grow up without fear. She paused, letting the words sink in. The Vecran will learn what happens when you make humanity angry. The galaxy will learn why we survived our homeworld, and New Haven will be remembered as the day we stopped asking for permission to exist. Admiral Tae-hyung received the final authorization code. He sat in his command chair aboard the battleship Indomitable, surrounded by officers who were ready, angry, and determined. The fleet was assembled. 300 warships fresh from the yards, 10,000 support craft, 1,000,000 personnel. He opened a channel to all ships. This is Admiral Nam. Our mission is simple. The Vecran Empire murdered our people and laughed about it. We're going to teach them why that was a mistake. But we're not them. We don't target civilians. We don't bomb colonies. We're human, and humans do this right. He took a breath. Remember New Haven, remember why we're here, and show the galaxy what humanity looks like when you push us too far. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, Earth watched. Ahead of them, the Vecran had no idea what was coming. The Vecran Border Patrol detected the human fleet 3 hours before they arrived. The commander, a veteran warrior named Krethis, looked at his scanner in confusion. 20 human ships approaching their territory. Not a huge fleet, but unusual. Humans didn't make aggressive moves. They traded, they negotiated, they talked endlessly about laws and rights. Krethis sent a warning transmission. Human vessels, you are approaching Vecran space. State your intentions or turn back. Captain Jiwon Park, now commanding the strike carrier Vengeance, received the transmission aboard her ship. She thought about New Haven, about Do-hyun carrying his wounded daughter from the rubble, about Sunmi comforting terrified children, about Yuna working until her hands bled to save people who would have nightmares for the rest of their lives. She opened a channel. This is Captain Jiwon Park of the Terran Defense Fleet. We're here for the commanders who destroyed New Haven. Stand aside. Krethis laughed. Actually laughed. You have 20 ships. We have defense stations, planetary shields, and 3 full battle groups. Turn back before you embarrass yourselves. Jiwon nodded to her tactical officer. Show them. The human fleet split apart. Not just her 20 ships, but 200 more that had been hiding in their sensor shadows, using stealth technology the Vecran didn't know existed. They appeared all at once, surrounding the Vecran patrol in a perfect sphere. Last chance, Jiwon said calmly. Stand aside. Krethis hesitated. 200 ships. Modern designs. Weapons already charging. This wasn't a raid. This was an invasion force. He hit the emergency alert, broadcasting to all Vecran military units. But before the transmission completed, the humans jammed every frequency. No warnings would reach Vecran command. Not yet. The battle lasted 8 minutes. The Vecran fought like warriors, brave and skilled. They had conquered 17 species. Their empire had stood for 3,000 years. Their soldiers were trained from birth. None of it mattered. The humans fought like machines. Every shot calculated, every movement precise. Their AI targeting systems tracked every Vecran ship simultaneously. Their railguns punched through shields that had withstood centuries of warfare. Their EMP bombs disabled entire formations. When it was over, the Vecran patrol was debris. Krethis' ship was captured intact, life support functional, crew alive. The humans could have killed everyone. They chose not to. That was somehow more terrifying. What the Vecran didn't know was that this was happening in 20 different locations simultaneously. Admiral Tae-hyung watched the tactical display from his command ship. 20 strike groups, each hitting a different Vecran military installation. Fuel depots, shipyards, command stations, weapons platforms. Not civilian targets, not colonies, just military infrastructure, stripped away with surgical precision. Commander Seojun Kwon, his tactical operations officer, monitored the incoming reports. Strike Group 7 reports complete success. Group 12 encountered heavy resistance but achieved objectives. Group 3 captured a Vecran admiral along with his entire staff. Casualties? Tae-hyung asked. 43 dead, 120 wounded, Seojun replied. The Vecran lost over 3,000 ships and 50,000 personnel. Tae-hyung closed his eyes briefly. 43 humans dead, 50,000 Vecran. Those numbers would haunt him. But he had seen the New Haven footage. He had read the reports. This wasn't murder. This was war. And in war you protected your people. Broadcast our message, he ordered. The transmission went out across every Vecran channel, every Galactic Council frequency, every news network in known space. It was Admiral Tae-hyung standing in his uniform, his face tired but determined. I am Admiral Tae-hyung Nam of the Terran Defense Fleet. For the past 6 hours, human forces have conducted military operations against the Vecran Empire. We have destroyed approximately 1/3 of their offensive capability. We have captured 4 of their command stations and taken 17 senior officers into custody. He paused. We did not target civilians. We did not bomb colonies. We did not laugh while children died. We are not the Vecran Empire, another pause. But we are angry. New Haven was our colony. Those people were under our protection. The Vecran murdered them as a demonstration of power. They wanted to intimidate neighboring systems. They succeeded only in showing us who they really are. He leaned forward. The Galactic Council has had hours to respond to our emergency transmissions. They have not. They have shown us that laws only matter when they protect the powerful, so we wrote our own justice. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in shock. Humanity, the traitors, the diplomats, the peaceful builders, had just crippled a major military power in 6 hours. The real target came next. Captain Jiwon led her strike group toward the Vecran command station that had coordinated the New Haven massacre. It orbited a gas giant in the heart of Vecran territory, supposedly impregnable, dozens of defense platforms, fighter squadrons, a battle group stationed permanently on guard. None of it was enough. Colonel Hyerin Choi commanded the ground assault force. She was a special operations officer, trained for the missions that regular military couldn't handle, boarding enemy stations, rescuing hostages, fighting in zero gravity. She had done it all. But this was different. This was personal. Her team breached the station through a maintenance port, cutting through the hull with plasma torches. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, using the station's own layout against the defenders. The Vecran were tough, strong, deadly in close combat. But Hyerin's team had trained for this. Every corner, every doorway, every possible ambush point. They reached the command center in 23 minutes. Overlord Thrakis, the officer who had personally ordered the New Haven bombardment, was trying to delete files when they burst through the door. Hyerin shot the computer console, freezing the data. Then she aimed at Thrakis. You can come with us alive or dead, she said in perfect Vecran. Choose. Thrakis looked at the soldiers surrounding him, at the weapons pointed at his head, at the cold determination in Hyerin's eyes. He raised his hands. I was following orders, he said. So were the people who burned New Haven, Hyerin replied. Tell it to the judge. They captured 47 Vecran commanders that day. Every officer who had participated in the New Haven massacre. Everyone who had laughed. The humans had tracked them all down using intelligence gathered over years of peaceful trade. They knew the Vecran command structure. They knew who gave orders and who followed them. Admiral Tae-hyung received the final reports. All objectives achieved, minimal casualties. The Vecran military was shattered, their command structure captured, their ability to wage war reduced to almost nothing. It had taken 3 weeks. The Vecran civilian government sent an emergency transmission suing for peace. They offered reparations, trade concessions, territory, anything to make it stop. Admiral Tae-hyung's response was public, broadcast on every channel. We don't want your money. We don't want your territory. We want justice for New Haven. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. The major powers activated their fleets, unsure whether to intervene. Smaller species began sharing their own stories of Vecran aggression, of atrocities swept under bureaucratic rugs, of justice denied because they were too weak to fight back. Captain Jiwon broadcast from the captured command station. She stood in the same room where Thrakis had ordered the bombardment. The same room where Vecran officers had laughed about murdering children. This is the horizon's edge, she said, using her old ship's name deliberately. New Haven remembers. We all remember. And we will never forget. The transmission reached Earth. Premier Sujin watched it from her office, surrounded by advisors who were arguing about next steps. Some wanted to press the advantage, to demand more concessions. Others worried about galactic reaction, about making enemies of species who might have been allies. Sujin silenced them with a gesture. This was never about conquest. This was about justice. We got what we came for. But the galaxy was already changing. The old powers looked at humanity differently now. The weak looked at them with hope. And the Vecran learned what every species would soon understand. Humanity had been peaceful because they chose to be, not because they had to be. And when you took that choice away, when you murdered their children and laughed about it, you discovered something terrible. Humans remembered everything, and they were very, very good at math. Ambassador Minho Kang walked into the Galactic Council chambers for the first time in 6 weeks. He wasn't a member anymore. He had no official status. But Premier Sujin had asked him to attend as a witness, and the council couldn't refuse without appearing afraid of the truth. The chamber was packed. Every species in the galaxy had sent representatives. The air hummed with translated voices, with tension, with uncertainty. High Chancellor Vorath of the Tekken species sat at the central podium, his 4 eyes fixed on Minho with barely concealed anger. Ambassador Kang, Vorath began, his voice amplified across the vast room. Humanity has committed acts of war against a council member state. You have violated treaties that have kept peace for 1,000 years. You have shown contempt for galactic law. What do you have to say? Minho stood at the speaker's platform alone. Behind him, holographic displays showed footage from New Haven. The images played on loop. Children running, fire falling from the sky, shelters collapsing. He let them play for 30 seconds. Then he spoke. I have nothing to say in defense. Humanity did exactly what you described. We violated treaties. We attacked a council member. We showed contempt for your laws. He paused. Because your laws are worthless, the chamber erupted. Voices shouting in 100 languages. Vorath pounded his gavel, demanding order. How dare you? Vorath said when the noise died down. The council has maintained peace for a peace? Minho cut him off. Is that what you call New Haven? 46,000 dead civilians. Children murdered in their schools. Medical facilities deliberately targeted. Where was the council then? That was an internal territorial dispute, Vorath said stiffly. The Vecran had legitimate historical claims. They had nothing but guns and the will to use them, Minho said. And you let them because the Vecran have a council seat. Because they're powerful. Because stopping them would be inconvenient. A new voice spoke up. Counselor Eric of the Quillian species, a small mammalian race from the Outer Rim. Ambassador Kang speaks truth that many of us have whispered for years. The Vecran destroyed one of our colonies 30 years ago. We brought evidence to this council. We begged for intervention. He looked around the chamber. We were told it was a border dispute. We were told to negotiate. We were weak. They were strong. So they took our world and we could do nothing. More voices joined in. A representative from the Fellish species. Another from the Carthani. Small civilizations. Minor powers. Species with no military strength. Each one with a story. Each one ignored by the council because justice required power to enforce it. Vorath's voice cut through the growing chaos. Humanity's actions have destabilized the entire galactic order. We cannot allow one species to wage war whenever they feel aggrieved. I am calling for a coalition force to restore proper authority. A coalition against whom? Minho asked quietly. Against the species that stopped a genocidal empire. Against the only civilization that actually enforced the laws you claim to uphold. Against those who violate council jurisdiction, Vorath replied. Then I suppose you'll need a large fleet, Minho said. Because 6 major species have already refused your call, and 3 minor species have been supplying us with intelligence on Vecran operations. That was news to Vorath. His eyes widened slightly. Behind him, his aides were frantically checking reports. It was true. The Quillians had shared Vecran fleet movements. The Fellish had provided tactical data. Even some larger powers like the Arashi had quietly indicated they wouldn't oppose human actions. The galaxy was splitting. Not into war, but into a question. What did civilization mean? Did it protect the innocent or the powerful? On Earth, Premier Sujin held daily briefings with her advisors. The military situation was stable. The Vecran were contained. But the political situation was volatile. Every day brought new developments. The Tekken were building a coalition. The Quillians were formally requesting human protection. Smaller species were looking to humanity as a potential ally against stronger neighbors. We didn't want this, Sujin said to her chief of staff. We just wanted justice for New Haven. We got justice, her advisor replied. Now we need to decide what comes next. The galaxy is watching. They're waiting to see if we're conquerors or protectors. Admiral Tai Hyung faced the same question from a military perspective. His fleet controlled Vecran space. He could push further if ordered. Take their homeworld. Dismantle their entire empire. The orders would be followed. The military was ready, but that wasn't the mission. The mission was justice, and justice had been delivered. Pull back to defensive positions, Taehyung ordered. Maintain the blockade around Vecran core systems, but no further offensive operations unless they attack first. His officers looked at him in surprise. Sir, we have them beaten. We could end this entirely. We could, Taehyung agreed. But then we'd be conquerors. And humanity didn't survive this long by becoming the thing we hated. The decision rippled across the galaxy. Humanity had won but chose not to destroy their enemy. They had power but refused to abuse it. Species who had watched nervously, waiting to see if humans were the next great threat, began to relax. Those who hoped for a new order began to hope harder. The turning point came during a council session 3 weeks after the war started. Councillor Eric asked for permission to speak. When granted, he walked to the center of the chamber, an elderly alien who had spent his life in diplomacy. I have served on this council for 40 years, Eric began. I believed in what we represented. Peace through law, justice through cooperation. But I was wrong. Or rather, I believed in an ideal that didn't exist. He turned slowly, looking at every representative. Today we decide what civilization means. Does it mean protecting the innocent? Or does it mean protecting our comfortable positions? Because we cannot do both. The humans destroyed New Haven, someone shouted. They started this. The Vecran destroyed New Haven, Eric corrected. The humans ended it. And they did what this council should have done 30 years ago when my people were attacked. They enforced the law that says you cannot murder civilians for political gain. Vorath tried to regain control. This is not about one colony, it's about every colony, Eric said firmly. Every weak species that depends on the strong to show mercy. Every civilization that trusts the council to protect them. We failed, humanity succeeded. That's what frightens us. The session ended without resolution. But something had changed. The smaller species began meeting separately, forming a bloc. They called themselves the Protected Systems Initiative. Their stated goal was simple: support any power that actually enforced the law, not just wrote it. Humanity didn't ask to lead them, but they were asked anyway. Premier Sujin addressed the galaxy directly, broadcast on every network. She stood alone, no advisors, no script. Just her and a camera and billions watching. We didn't want to be warriors, she said. We wanted to be explorers, traders, friends to anyone who would have us. The Vecran took that choice away. They murdered our people and expected us to accept it because we were weak. She paused. We weren't weak. We were peaceful. There's a difference. One is inability, the other is choice. The galaxy is asking what humanity wants now. The answer is simple. We want what we've always wanted. To live in peace. To raise our children without fear. To know that if we call for help, someone will come. We asked the council for help. They gave us paperwork. So we wrote our own verdict. The Vecran will stand trial. Their commanders will face justice. Their empire will be restructured. And New Haven will never be forgotten. She leaned forward, her voice soft but carrying weight. To the species watching who face stronger neighbors, who fear aggression, who wonder if anyone would help them. We would. Not because we want territory or power. But because we remember what it's like to be helpless, and we refuse to let others feel that way if we can prevent it. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, something fundamental shifted. The Galactic Council had maintained order for 1,000 years. But order isn't justice, stability isn't peace, and fear of the powerful isn't the same as respect for the law. The Vecran formally surrendered 3 days later. Not to the Council, to humanity. They agreed to hand over all personnel involved in New Haven. They agreed to reparations. They agreed to military restrictions and oversight. But most importantly, they agreed to something that would change the galaxy forever. They acknowledged that what they did was wrong. Not illegal. Not inconvenient. Wrong. Evil. Unforgivable. It was the first time a major power had admitted moral failure rather than claiming legal justification. The galaxy learned something that day. Humanity would forgive almost anything if you admitted fault and tried to make it right. But if you murdered their people and laughed, if you hid behind laws and power and bureaucracy, if you thought they would forget because they were weak, you learned the most important lesson. Humans weren't weak. They were patient. And patience shouldn't be mistaken for acceptance. The trial took place on New Haven itself. Not in some distant council chamber, not behind closed doors, but here where 46,000 people had died. The humans had cleared the rubble from the main square. They built a simple courtroom under the open sky where everyone could see, where the whole galaxy could watch. Overlord Thrakis stood in the defendant's box with 46 other Vecran commanders. They wore restraints but were otherwise unharmed. They had been treated according to human military law, fed, given medical care, allowed to speak with lawyers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. These officers had laughed while bombing shelters full of children. Now they received more mercy than they had ever shown. The judges were 3 human civilians. A farmer from New Haven who had lost his son, a retired teacher from Earth, a legal scholar from Mars. Not military officers, not politicians. Just people who understood what justice meant. Admiral Tae-hyung sat in the gallery watching. He had captured these officers. He had brought them here. But the verdict wasn't his to decide. War was his responsibility. Justice belonged to the people. Captain Ji-won attended every day of the trial. She sat in the front row wearing her uniform, her expression neutral. She had rescued the survivors. She had recorded the evidence. She had fought the battles. Now she witnessed the conclusion. The prosecution presented its case over 3 days. They showed the orbital bombardment. They played the audio of Vecran officers laughing. They brought survivors to testify. Do-hyun Lee stood before the court and described finding his daughter trapped under rubble, her legs crushed, crying for him to make it stop. Sun Mi-han explained how she had to choose which students to evacuate first, knowing some would die because there wasn't enough room. Yuna Kim listed every patient she lost, every person she couldn't save, every family destroyed. The defense argued that the officers were following orders, that they believed the colony was a legitimate military target, that they had no way of knowing civilians would be present in such numbers. The prosecution presented evidence that the Vecran had perfect knowledge of New Haven's population. They had trade records. They had embassy reports. They knew exactly who they were killing. On the 4th day, Overlord Thrakis was asked if he wanted to speak. He stood, his scales shimmering under the sun that had once warmed the fields now turned to ash. "I followed my orders," he said. "I did what my empire required. I would do it again." The gallery was silent. Even his own lawyers looked shocked. He had just confessed, not with regret, not with excuse, with pride. The verdict took 6 hours to deliberate. When the judges returned, the entire galaxy was watching. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds all tuned to the same broadcast. "We find the defendants guilty of murder, war crimes, and crimes against sapient life," the head judge announced. "We sentence them to life imprisonment, to be served under human custody, with the possibility of parole after 50 years if they demonstrate genuine remorse. Not execution, not torture, not the treatment they had given New Haven, just imprisonment and the chance, however small, at redemption." Thrakis laughed. "You're weak. You could have killed us. You should have. We could have," the judge agreed. "But we're not you. And that's the difference." The Vecran Empire's restructuring began immediately. Their military was reduced to 10% of its former size, enough for defense but not for conquest. They were required to pay reparations not just to humanity, but to every species they had harmed. The Quillians received compensation for their lost colony. The Fellish were given territory back. Justice, 3 decades late, but still justice. Colonel Hiron Choi supervised the transition. She had captured these commanders. Now she ensured their empire couldn't threaten anyone again. It was strange work. Not fighting, but building, making sure the Vecran civilian government remained stable, that food kept flowing, that the innocent didn't suffer for their leaders' crimes. "Why do you care?" a Vecran civilian asked her one day. "We would have exterminated you if we won." "Probably," Hiron agreed. "But you didn't win, we did. And we get to decide what winning means." New Haven was rebuilt over the next 2 years. Species from across the galaxy sent aid. The Quillians provided construction materials. The Arashi sent engineers. Even some Vecran civilians volunteered, trying to make amends for what their empire had done. Do-hyun Lee returned to his farm. The fields would never be the same. The soil was contaminated in places. The irrigation destroyed, the crops turned to ash, but he planted anyway. His daughter, walking on prosthetic legs built by human and alien doctors working together, helped him. They planted wheat first, then the medicinal plants that had made New Haven important. Why come back? Someone asked him. Why not start fresh somewhere else? Because they tried to erase us, Do-hyun replied, his hands in the soil. And we're still here. That matters. A memorial was built in the center of New Haven, 46,000 names carved in stone from Earth. Each name represented a life, a story, a future that would never be. People came from across human space to visit, to remember, to ensure it would never happen again. Captain Ji-won took command of the defense station orbiting New Haven. It was the most advanced military installation humanity had ever built. Enough firepower to hold off a fleet, enough sensors to detect threats from 3 systems away. It would never fall. New Haven would never burn again. She stood on the observation deck looking down at the planet and thought about the families returning. About Do-hyun in his fields, about Sunmi teaching a new generation of students, about Yuna training doctors to treat trauma that no one should ever experience. They're rebuilding, her executive officer said beside her. We all are, Ji-won replied. The Galactic Council reformed 6 months after the war ended. The old structure was dissolved. The new one had different rules. Aggression against civilians was now a universal crime, not a political issue. Any species could call for intervention, and intervention would come, not from politicians debating, but from a combined fleet with humanity at its core. Ambassador Minho returned to diplomatic service, but not on the council. He became humanity's representative to the Protected Systems Initiative, the alliance of smaller species who had found their voice. They didn't want humanity to rule them. They wanted humanity to stand with them. We're not conquerors, Minho told them at the first meeting. We don't want your territory or your resources. We want partners, friends, species who will remember that civilization means protecting the weak, not exploiting them. The galaxy had changed. The old powers were adapting, learning that strength alone wasn't enough anymore. The Tekkan began reforming their military policies. The Carthani opened diplomatic relations with species they had previously ignored. Even the Council, diminished but still present, started actually enforcing its own laws. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still species who believed might made right. But there was also hope, and there was humanity watching. Admiral Tae-hyung retired after 3 years. He had done what was necessary. He had brought justice to New Haven. Now he could rest. He returned to Earth, to a small house in the countryside far from politics and war rooms and the weight of command. Do you regret it? A journalist asked him on his final day. The war? The deaths? Every day, Tae-hyung replied. 50,000 veteran died because of my orders. That's 50,000 people who won't go home, but 46,000 humans died before I gave any orders. And they died for nothing except cruelty, so no, I don't regret stopping it. I regret that it was necessary. Premier Soo-jin served 2 more terms. She guided humanity through the transition from a peaceful civilization to one that was peaceful but prepared. She built alliances, reformed treaties, and ensured that human military power would never be used for conquest, only for protection. In her final address before retiring, she stood in the same Geneva hall where she had authorized the war. 10 years ago, New Haven burned, she said. We asked the galaxy for justice. They gave us bureaucracy, so we created our own justice, and in doing so, we changed everything. She looked at the gathered representatives, the holographic presences from hundreds of worlds. Some of you feared we would become conquerors. We understand. Power corrupts, but we learned something on our homeworld long before we reached the stars. The measure of civilization isn't how you treat the strong, it's how you protect the weak. New Haven taught us that we're never alone. Every human colony is connected. Touch one and you face all of us. But it also taught us something bigger. Every sapient being deserves protection. Every child deserves to grow up without fear. And if the galaxy won't provide that protection, we will. She paused, letting the words settle. We don't want to rule you. We want to stand with you, to ensure that what happened to New Haven never happens to anyone anywhere. The galaxy learned to live with the new reality. Humanity had proven they could fight and fight well, but more importantly, they had proven they would stop fighting when justice was served. They weren't interested in empires or domination. They just wanted to ensure that the strong couldn't prey on the weak anymore. Remember New Haven became more than a human phrase. Other species adopted it. It became a warning to aggressors, a promise to victims, a reminder that civilization required more than just laws written on paper.